Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. We have a great episode for you today. I'm bringing back a previous guest on Dean's Chat, Dr. Warren Joseph. Welcome back to Dean's Chat, Dr. Joseph.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. It's nice to be invited, and I've noticed over the last year or so, you've really developed your mellifluous host voice. You now sound like you should be hosting a podcast.
It's been a work in progress, Warren.
It's very nice. I'll try not to fall asleep during it.
Okay, we don't want you to fall asleep. There's no way anybody's going to fall asleep today because we got some exciting stuff to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
About a month ago, I called Warren and said, hey, let's do a podcast on the Journal of the American Podiatric Medical Association, its history, the articles, the publishing process, and I've got a whole list of things to talk about, Warren. But to get started, you work with me at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine. You teach our evidence-based medicine course, and a lot of what we're going to talk about today you share with our students. But I thought it might be interesting to share a lot of this information, not just with our listeners, but it would also get out to young practitioners that are considering doing research and publishing in the journal.
Sure. No, absolutely. And the whole crux of the course that I teach is to try to get our students to understand that they have to be self-directed learners. I mean, the number one, you don't even get journals in the mail anymore. And, in our day, you used to get journals. I would have a whole stack always sitting in my desk. And when the stack got too big, I'd go through all the table of contents and rip out the papers I'm interested in and staple them together and kept them in a file. Those days are gone. They're not, being put on your desk anymore. They're all online. Okay. All these journals, the vast majority of them at least, have gone digital. So it's up to you, or in our case, our students, our residents, and the practitioners in the profession to go out and actually make a concerted effort to read the literature and understand the literature. And that's what I try to teach them. I work very closely with the library staff at the university that, we teach the students how to do searching and then how to critically evaluate what they're reading. Because we do a lot of journal clubs. We have 3 journal club sessions with various faculty members from the college that are very helpful. We break into small group and we have discussions about papers that these students pick. So that's really what I try to do with this course. And I think it's important for everyone in the profession. You have to be self-directed. You have to be self-motivated because unlike the old days, it's not coming to you anymore. You have to go out and get it. And there are ways to do that. I mean, one of the things I teach the students about, and I've been doing for many, many years, is I'm sure all of our listeners are familiar with PubMed. Of
course.
PubMed.gov is the easy access to it. And PubMed's put out by an organization, NCBI. And if you go up to, I think it's the upper right-hand corner, and you log in, you register, it's totally free because it's a government service. You log in, you register. There's something called My NCBI, where you can list and register for different topics. And then every day, week, month, whatever you set it for, whatever you set the filters for, you get sent any information, any papers that come out on that topic in the past period of time. So for instance, every Monday morning, I get 3 My NCBI emails, one on onychomycosis, one on diabetic foot infections, and one on osteomyelitis. And in those emails, every paper that's been published in the world literature in the past week is listed there. It's a perfect, easy way to keep up with the literature. And I don't think enough people know about it, and enough people know it because it makes you sound really intelligent when you're speaking to other people because last week a paper was published, and you can sound very bright when you do that. But there are ways to do it. It's just up to you to do it.
That sounds preferable to having a stack of magazines like on your coffee table.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because not 3/4. I would get, for instance, antimicrobial agents in chemotherapy. Yes, I know. I'm a nerd, which is a publication of the American Society for Microbiology. And it would be, this thick every issue. It came out twice a month. It would come in. And it was all on all the new research on new antimicrobial agents. And there'd be antivirals, antifungals, antibiotics, everything. And I would say in an average issue, there might be one or two papers relevant to what I do,
Right.
but I'd have to go through that table of contents and find that article and, like, again, quite literally physically tear it out and staple it together and file it. So now it's all just you look at the emails, you look through the abstracts, you see what looks interesting to you, and you can get the paper. We can get it through the MWU library system. Many of them, unfortunately, MWU doesn't have all the journals that I need, but I have a couple of secret sources I can use to get those papers. But yeah, and that way you can pick and choose and get exactly what you want.
Fantastic. And in the show notes, we'll put some of these notes in there so people can make it easy. We can make it easy for them to access.
Sure. Yeah,
All
a
right.
couple of good links. I mean, I think that's a great way to go.
So let's shift gears to the Journal of the American Podiatric Medical Association. Certainly a profession is defined by its contribution to the literature and the medical proliferation of content. JAPMA's been around, Warren, since 1907.
Yeah, yeah, we're over 100 years old. I think it started out, I think it was originally called Pedic Items, PEDIC, Pedic Items. And then it became, Journal of the American Society of Chiropody.
Yeah.
And, when chiropody changed to podiatric medicine in the 60s, for years, I mean, when you and I both got in this field, it was the Journal of the American Podiatry Association. And now it's, of course, the association, when they changed their name, now it's the Journal of the American Podiatric Medical Association. And I've been editor. It's hard to believe I've been editor of this for over 30 years.
Wow.
I know it just shows how that's what the gray hair is all about. My mentor at the time at the then Pennsylvania College of Podiatric Medicine, Dr. Harvey Lamont, who was my chairman, said to me when the previous editor, I believe it was Dalton McGlamory, everybody knows of Dr. McGlamory, when Dr. McGlamory retired, and they put out a call for a new editor, Harvey was, you should really apply for this, because I had already written a number of articles, even early in my profession, early in my career. And I said, I don't know, but he really pushed it. And he was my boss. What was I going to say? So not only did he make me apply for it or suggest I apply for it, it wasn't just sending in a letter, or back then we didn't have emails. It wasn't sending in a letter saying, yeah, I want to be journal editor. He made me put together a booklet. This book was like a couple hundred pages, got to be maybe 100 pages thick, of every paper I've written, my goals and objectives for the journal, what I wanted to do with it. I don't think APMA expected this. I don't think APMA knew what to do with it. And Glenn Gasworth was executive director of APMA at the time, and I got invited down for an interview with him. And yeah, I think that's what blew them away. The fact that I submitted an application this thick with everything I had done, and the rest is, I don't know if I want to say history, but yeah, I've been doing it over 30 years now.
Wow. Nothing like a man with a plan, right?
You gotta be, and as you've mentored countless students, and when our good friend Rob Snyder invited me down last year to give the commencement address at the Miami School, the Barry School, I talked on the importance of having a mentor. And, that's what I had two, Dr. Jack Lafrock, who was my mentor in infectious diseases, and Dr. Lamont, my mentor in academic podiatry. And he pushed me to do it. We're having a couple of, it's like 50 degrees and raining here, and the light's flickering a little bit. Hopefully I won't lose power. We did 2 days ago. And I'll tell you, it was remarkable, but he pushed me to do this. He made me do it the right way. And that got me the job that I've been doing for as long as I've been doing it. So it's important. It's important, the roles we have as academics, to mentor upcoming people and push them, give them a little direction, and push them if they don't even want to do something.
Absolutely. This might seem like a basic question, but what is the purpose of a professional journal? Just a broad discussion here.
Yeah, I think the purpose of a professional journal is the reflection of the profession. It's the reflection of the profession scientifically. In older times, earlier on, we used to do some of the stuff that you get in APMA news used to be part of the journal, more of the who's doing what to who and the political side. But we're now strictly the scientific arm of it, and it's a reflection on what's being done in the profession from a scientific standpoint. And we're very fortunate with JAPMA, unlike some other more specialized journals in the profession, we're not limited to just doing surgical papers. We're not limited to just doing biomechanical papers. I mean, we cover the entire realm of podiatric medicine and surgery. So yes, we do certainly have papers on surgery, but we have a lot of papers coming in on biomechanics, a lot of papers coming in on the medical aspects of podiatry, public health aspects of podiatry. So we're able to really bring together everything that reflects on what's being done in the latest science in foot and ankle medicine.
Well, I like that. I want to give a plug to JAPMAonline.org. It's just a wonderful resource for any prospective researcher, somebody who's interested in making contributions to the literature. They do everything on that site, Warren, from manuscript preparation to types of articles to guidelines.
Yeah, I do that all the time. I use it all the time. When I'm in the review system we have, which is called Allen Track, or I forget that we've changed it a couple of times. But when I'm looking at new papers and trying to assign peer reviewers, I always have JAPMA Online open because I need to be able to go back. I want to see what we've published on a particular topic in the past. So I'll search for that. It helps me find peer reviewers because if it's a topic I know we've published on, I'll find who the authors were on the previously published papers. And absolutely. And I also use it a lot because, as you mentioned, guidelines for authors. I looked at a paper today that came in. This is very classic for resident generated papers. The residents find an interesting case. They think they're going to write it up. And it was something or other lesion. It was a nerve lesion, a case report and review of the literature. Well, right off the bat, we never call something a review of the literature unless it's a systematic review or a systematic review with a meta-analysis. I actually just received one of those. Actually, we had two just today. I read two systematic reviews that have been submitted to the journal. But a case report and review of the literature doesn't exist because the introduction is the review of the literature by default. So you don't have to call it review of the literature. But what I have a form letter that I use more often than I wish I had to. I didn't have to use it this often. That is called the revise reformat.
Okay.
And it's because these papers come in and we don't have the right information in the introduction and the case report's there, and it sounds like an operative report. Patient was placed on the table in the supine position, and you don't need that.
Right.
And then the discussion they use to put all of the introductory material, all of the previously reported papers in there, and that's not how it goes. Introduction. And this is, again, I teach this in the course. I have a whole lecture that I teach on how to write a journal article. The introduction is where you spell out all of the existing literature on a particular condition. Then you give the case, or in a case of a study, then you give the materials and methods and the results. But anyway, then the discussion is only used to do, quote unquote, discuss how your findings, be it in a study or even a case report, how your findings are consistent or differ from the background information that's in the introduction. And people who aren't experienced authors just don't know that.
Right.
So I'm always directing them right on the top of that form letter. It always says, please review the journal's guidelines for authors found at JAPMAonline.org to understand what goes into each section of a paper, of a case report. So you're right. There's a lot of knowledge in there. There are links to our online submission system, so you can actually go in and you could submit a paper that way also. So yeah, it's a really incredible resource.
It is. One of the things I thought you and I could highlight are the types of articles. And I thought that the website did a great job outlining these. But, when you think of research, you think of original research. You're doing research, you're getting results, you have your IRB approval, and then you're writing up the results. But when I went through the website, it was really eye-opening to the different aspects of topics that we could talk about. Do you mind if I just go through a couple of them and we talk about them?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the topics in podiatric medical education. That is a huge topic in and of itself.
Well, as I mentioned, we're very fortunate that we're not limited to just one aspect of the profession. We're able to publish lots of things. We've done a couple of full special issues back when we were in print, and now when we do a special issue, it's online and we just divide out the papers. We've done full special issues, full special sections on education topics.
Right.
So yes, we absolutely cover areas that are unique or about podiatric education.
Okay. Next topic, basic science reviews.
Yeah, you know what? You have a good anatomy topic, a good pharmacology topic, anything that falls into basic science, physiology. Frequently, these come in. They're often written by PhDs in a particular area. They tend to be very academic, but you can absolutely have a review that just goes back to the basic science of a topic. Now, we're getting away a little bit from the narrative review. Even though in the basic science reviews, I think a narrative review is still somewhat appropriate, especially if it's done by someone who's authoritative in the field.
Right.
Then sure, a narrative review would be appropriate. But we tend to be leaning a little bit more towards systematic reviews, scoping reviews, things along those lines. But yeah, again, we're not stuck on any one given area in the profession. If someone has an interesting anatomic finding or a pharmacologic finding or any of those, that can be a basic science review.
I think that's pertinent for students, not just at the Arizona College, but throughout the country, because we all have access to basic scientists in our colleges and schools, and they all have wonderful ideas, and they're doing good research and finding something that's relevant to the foot is not that hard.
No, the foot bone's connected to the leg bone.
Absolutely. So a few other things. We start moving into the realm of clinical types of articles, clinical pharm, clinical path, clinical correspondences. I mean, can you comment on that?
Yeah, these are basically, when you're looking at a clinical correspondence sort of article, it's easy to write. It's kind of like a dear colleagues sort of thing. This is an interesting finding I have. It's not as rigorous as even a full case report is. It's just kind of just an interesting note of something you found. We don't do as many of those. We used to do a lot more of them. I think more people are doing things like case reports nowadays.
Right.
And case report, maybe what used to maybe be a clinical correspondence is now being written up as a full case report, which is not necessarily a good thing because people tend to go a little bit long-winded. I've said for years, the short is good. The shorter an article is, the better. And I've used the example, and I believe, again, Dr. Lamont taught me this, was that the original description of the DNA double helix by Watson and Crick was 1 page long.
And it wasn't peer reviewed either, was it?
I'm not sure whether it was peer reviewed. That part I don't remember.
Okay.
But I mean, I've looked at it. It's literally a page long. The original description of penicillin by Alexander Fleming was less than 2 full pages long. So some of these world-changing, Nobel Prize-winning scientific discoveries have been done in very brief format. You don't have to give me everything you always wanted to know about melanomas. When you submit a case of an unusual melanoma, and by the way, if you're thinking of submitting a melanoma, it better be something unique because the topic's been, beaten to death. We've published so much, all the journals publish so much on that. But you can be brief and you can be concise, and that's certainly something that I'd like to see. It makes it easier, and I think it's easier for the reader.
Totally, yeah.
The reader can digest more of something that's brief. I know if we'll get submitted a paper and it's maybe an infectious disease topic, which of course, is my thing. And I know if I'm falling asleep reading it, it's too long.
Right.
Right.
It's interesting. What kind of an analogy to that is we spend so much time writing abstracts and grants. The reason being is people have a short attention span, and if the abstract doesn't catch their attention, they're not even going to move on from that.
And we actually say that in the JAPMA online under the guidelines for authors, talking about the abstract and how the abstract shouldn't be an afterthought. Because
Right.
you're absolutely right. If someone reads an abstract and it doesn't catch their interest, it's gone. I mean, your paper is not being read by anybody.
Right.
So yeah, you need to actually make the abstract something that attracts people and not just an afterthought. And that's really, really important. Listen, I admit, when I get those my NCBI emails, how do I determine what I'm going to read?
Abstract.
Whether I'm going to pull the whole paper is the abstract.
Right.
I mean, I look at the title, I then look at the abstract, and if it says, wow, this looks like some really good data, then I say, let's pull the paper, and then I'll look at the entire paper. So sure. But I'll tell you, a lot of times the abstract, after I read the whole paper, just saying, yeah, whatever was in the abstract is what I really needed to get out of this.
Right.
So it is an important area. It really is. And like you said, concise. It's all the information you need can be in that abstract. If you
Right.
want details, then you can read the rest of the paper.
Absolutely. And so one of my goals, Warren, is to stimulate people, doctors, residents, students that haven't really done research to delve into it a little bit, because there's all these different topics and it's not as arduous as one might have thought previously. Was that a fair statement?
No, absolutely. It's not a big onerous thing to write. I mean, certainly we talk about mentorship. Find someone who is a mentor. In fact, we won't accept papers. I had a paper submitted just 2 weeks ago that was by a student in one of the podiatric colleges. And our policy actually says student papers have to have a faculty member on them. It's just the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
And the paper has since been resubmitted with a faculty member, and it's just interesting to see. But you can get into writing and into publishing with something as basic as an interesting case report. Not everybody is going to do, like you said, bench research. Not everyone's going to even do clinical trials. Listen, if you're in podiatric college, you don't have time. Our students don't have time to get involved with a big multi-year clinical trial. All right. Even as a resident, you don't have time necessarily to get involved in that. Maybe you can be peripherally involved and get your name on the paper, but you don't necessarily you don't necessarily feel you have to do that to get your first publication out. Get on with some of the interesting cases. Our colleague and friend Dave Jenkins, Dr. Jenkins, who's faculty, has been on a tear lately with some interesting stuff on diabetes aid dogs or diabetes assist dogs and diabetes detection dogs and all of this. And he's got some really great case reports that he's been able to put together of just the use of these specially trained dogs who have this incredible sense of smell. And a recent paper that he submitted, and we're not supposed to talk about papers that aren't published yet, but is just some cases from a number of the different students have seen at different locations. So if you find an interesting case, find a faculty member who has an interest in writing and has experience writing, and work up that case with them. Now, I will say, all that being said, the worst thing that can happen is what we used to have with the journal, where there used to be a requirement in the residency document that all residents had to submit a paper for publication in order to graduate their residency. What a disaster. And this is when we had, like 1,000 students out there in residency. Oh my, every April I would get inundated with these case reports that were poorly written. I would spend my time looking at them. I'd spend time of my peer reviewers looking at them. We'd send them back to the student or the resident, who was listed as the author. We would never hear from them again because they had done what they wanted to do. They had done what they were told they had to do. They submitted a paper to a journal and they didn't care anymore. And then I would contact the director of that residency program, whose name would be on the paper. They said, "Oh, I never read that." No, don't put your name on a paper if you haven't read it, folks. Don't put your name on the paper if you haven't contributed.
Right.
There are there are guidelines put out by the International Committee on Medical Journal Editors that tells you, that gives criteria for authorship and what you have to have done to declare yourself as an author, which includes taking public responsibility for that content. So we would be inundated with those papers. It was a disaster. Now at least we're getting papers from people who want to write, who are working with people who want to write, and that has massively increased the quality of the manuscripts that are submitted. So that was, thank God that policy was done away with probably 20 years ago. That was a disaster.
You've already answered this question, but I was going to ask you, what separates those that do write from those that don't write? Because there's 15,000 podiatrists out there seeing patients, and everybody's seeing interesting cases. Why do some people choose to write and others not, Warren? What's the tipping point there?
Academic bent, time. Our profession has not been overall, and I might catch some flack for this, an academically driven profession. There has not been a publish or perish mentality, right, even starting in our schools.
Right.
Even starting at our schools, there's not a publish or perish. There are full professors at colleges of podiatric medicine that have one or two papers written. It's not the way it is in MD medicine. Notice I don't say allopathic medicine. We are an allopathic profession. I can't stand when I hear people comparing podiatry to allopathic medicine. We are allopaths. I'm sorry, I get on a soapbox about things.
It's all right.
But I remember back when my mom, who was of course since passed away, was sick and she needed a mitral valve replacement. She went down to University of Pennsylvania, which of course top university teaching hospital, and she was being seen, and of course, being a good son who was involved in medicine, I wanted to check out the surgeons who she was seeing and the physicians she was seeing. And I would go online and it would be posted right on their websites, right on the university's website. And I was looking at assistant professors and instructors, probably like the lowest rung of the academic ladder, right, who would have 20, 30, 40 huge major clinical trials and scientific research published in the New England Journal of Medicine or the American Journal of Cardiology in this case, or, these top international journals, and they were assistant professors or even instructors.
Right.
All right. So I remember when, do I tell this story or I end up getting into trouble? I won't tell this story.
No, you should tell the story because we can edit it if we need to.
I remember when I was faculty at one of the schools, not yours, not ours currently, which will remain nameless. And the dean, the newly appointed dean, came in and said, I don't care about academics. All I care about is what you do in clinic, what you produce in clinic. And that's really been the mindset of many of the higher ups in our profession, is that in the academic role in our profession, academic production is not important. Dr. Lamont pushed us. Our increases, our salary raises, our promotions, absolutely depended on what we published.
Right.
Because he was genius, and he had, he's still alive. I shouldn't talk about him in the past tense, but he had incredible number of papers. And in fact, to this day, I think the number one cited article in the history of JAPMA is the paper he wrote on plantar fasciitis,
really?
Where he found, because those of you who remember Dr. Lamont, he was a podiatrist who was also a pathologist. He had his own pathology lab, and he noted that when he was sent specimens that were listed as plantar fasciitis, there was in fact no inflammation.
Right.
It was only, it's not a fasciitis, and he named it plantar fasciosus. And that paper on plantar fasciosus versus plantar fasciitis, I still make our students read it in my class, is still the number one reference paper in JAPMA history. Throughout the world, you now read papers on plantar fasciitis. Many of them use the term plantar fasciosus, thanks to Dr. Lamont. So he was a firm believer on the importance of developing new knowledge. And that's the goal of publication. That's the goal of our academic institutions. And that's why when we had our faculty retreat, Earl, I'll last week or earlier this week. My mind is kind of blown right now. We're going around, and it's amazing that our faculty is publishing as much as they're publishing, because I don't always see that in other faculties, not pointing out any particular school, but I don't see that from other faculties. So really something that is important, but that's why it's not in the mentality. It's not put into our students' minds from day one,
Right.
that this is something that's important, and they don't have the time to do it, and it's not considered an important thing for them to do. So that's one issue in just publishing in our profession. But number two, if you take and there have been papers that have looked at who publishes, and even in MD medicine, who publishes. Well, the people who publish are the MD PhDs, the PhDs, and the MDs in that order. That was an old paper, probably 20 years ago, but it's probably still the same. So the academic clinicians are the number one publishers, right? We don't have that in our profession because, number one, it's de-emphasized, but number two, it's a numbers game.
Right.
It's a numbers game, Jeff. If you take every faculty member, full-time and part-time, from every college of podiatric medicine, even though I think we're up to 13 now, right? Every college of podiatric medicine back in our day was 5. You have fewer faculty members than you might have in a single department of medicine at a major teaching university.
Right.
It's a numbers game. We just don't have the numbers to put out that sort of literature and put out that sort of work. And the numbers we have are too busy teaching.
Right.
I mean, even you're working the faculty to their fingers to the bone with teaching courses, full-time faculty.
Well, I don't know that I'm doing that.
I know, I'm just kidding. But the point is that, they all have lots of responsibilities.
Yep. Well, it's interesting, Warren, because, when faculty are assessed in an academic environment, it's your teaching, it's your scholarly work, and it's your service both to the profession and to the college. And a lot of times people will take that scholarly bucket and they'll just give lots of credit towards a poster or something that isn't published in a peer-reviewed journal. So, people do take credit for writing articles for like Podiatry Today, but it doesn't have the oomph, right? It doesn't have the academic wherewithal of a peer-reviewed journal, for example.
It's not an academic journal. Listen, I'm not putting down Podiatry Today, Podiatry Management. We all read them. They're interesting to read, but they're not peer reviewed. People aren't going to see them. They're not going to reference your work. So no, you're just not. It's not the same as being in an index peer reviewed journal. So that which is considered, the sine qua non of medical publication, being in one of those.
Well, I think we should put an exclamation point around that topic, because people are writing articles left and right into these trade journals, and they're not really articles, right?
Well, they're articles. They're not scientific manuscripts. And they're trades.
Right.
They're not medical journals. They're trades.
Absolutely.
Not putting them down. Again, we all read them. We all look through them. They're interesting. You can find some really good information in there, but it's not something. Somebody spends a lot of time writing an article on a particular condition like wound healing or diabetic or some dermatology issue, and they put it in one of those magazines. That's an incredible amount of time and effort spent, but it's never going to be referenced by anybody because it's not indexed. They're not going to find it on doing a PubMed search. So all that work, yeah, it's good for the couple of the people who read it. That's why I stopped doing book chapters.
Yeah.
Many years ago. I have so many book chapters I contributed to, and major textbooks, McGlamory's book, all sorts of different textbooks. I did book chapters, and then I realized, let's say I have a chapter in McGlamory's textbook, and it's been many editions ago. I don't have one in a long time, but it's not what I wrote. It's McGlamory's textbook.
Right.
And no one else sees it other than people who spend the money for the book, whether it be online. I don't know if that's online nowadays or strictly hard copy. But when you're doing things like that, the world doesn't have access to it. The world has access to articles that are in indexed journals.
Absolutely.
So that's where the thrust should be in publication, putting it into index journals.
Right. That makes sense. So I have a question for you, Warren. We were going around
Yeah.
the table and everybody was talking about their research at our strategic planning meeting, and everybody's got work in progress with students. They've got their own research. They're writing up manuscripts or submitting them to peer-reviewed journals, but they're not always sending to the Journal of the American Podiatric Medical Association. And when I asked them, I said, why don't you put this in JAPMA? One of their complaints is, well, it takes too long. Your thoughts on that?
It does. I'm the first one to admit that it takes too long. And there are a number of reasons for that. Number one is that the process is a lengthy process. We get a paper submitted to the journal, and first it has to go through a technical review, so internal review, where you have to make sure that everything's done right, the references are right. And we have an internal group that does that. Actually, that's another issue. Our entire journal is put together by two people. It's two internal staff. We've got Noel Solomon, who is our managing editor, and I've been working with Noel now probably at least 20 years, and Marwa Faid, who is our editorial assistant. The two of them are the only full-timers on this journal.
Wow.
All of it, from the submission process, managing our online presence, the copy editing, all of that has to be done by those two people.
Sounds like we're undercapitalized in a very important aspect of our profession.
We are, and I'll get people mad at me for saying that, but we are. I mean,
We are, yeah.
that is an issue. We don't have the support staff. So, but that aside, let's say we had the perfect support staff. Let's say we had everybody we wanted.
Okay.
Right? You still have to go through that technical review. Then it comes to me. I handle the peer review system. I handle making sure that the paper gets out to peer reviewers, either directly from me, or I now have a cadre of associate editors that I use in particular specialties that because they have knowledge. We have an associate editor, for instance, Daryl Phillips in biomechanics, Pat Burns in surgery, Lee Rogers in diabetic limb salvage, Tracy Vlahovic in dermatology. I'm going to miss some if I try to name them all. Rachel Albright in public health. So anyway, we have this group of specialty associate editors who handle the peer review for those sort of papers and then submit it all back to me. The big stumbling block, the big bottleneck is finding reviewers.
You've mentioned that.
It is not uncommon for us to have to go to 10 to 15 potential peer reviewers to get a single set of comments back. And that is not unique to JAPMA. That is every medical journal in the world. I published a paper recently, I think I already alluded to it, in Clinics and Podiatric Medicine, called The Peer Review System, an Editor's 30-Year Perspective.
Okay.
All right. Because what I did is I thought about my 30 years as being in this field and all of the problems with peer review. And it's an academic review. I went back and pulled all the, as much of the literature as I could find on the peer review system. The peer review system goes back to the 1800s, even though it really came into being in 1900. I tell a couple of interesting anecdotes about when peer review first started being used for medical journals and for scientific journals. Again, that's a relatively new subject, a relatively new topic, but we have the problem then that everybody has an opinion. So let's say I send it out to 15 reviewers, I get 2 reviews back. I'm lucky if that, but I get 2 reviews back. 2 equally credible, qualified reviewers. One of them gives me a decision of accept. One of them gives me a decision of reject.
Oh,
sometimes they have comments, sometimes they don't. They just check a box, which is useless to me.
right.
What do I have to do? I then have to go to more reviewers to try to break that tie. So the system is very, very long, arduous, and it takes quite a while even to get the reviews back. So now once I get the reviews back, what do? I have to take those reviews, send them back to the authors. Well, the authors get offended sometimes if the paper, the reviewer says some things that aren't, particularly pro the paper. but we have to wait, and then the authors can be busy. So it can take weeks or even months. We give the reviewers 2 weeks, but it takes longer. We give the authors 2 weeks, it takes longer. It can be months for an author to send a paper back to us. Once the paper's sent back to us, I can determine whether or not they've made the review changes the way they're supposed to, or I have to then send the paper back to the reviewer or the associate editor to make sure that they're satisfied with the changes made in the paper. And it goes back and forth until everybody agrees this paper is fine, then the paper can be published. Well, the paper to be published has to be proofread, it has to be formatted. And again, we're short-staffed for doing that. We try to get papers up online ahead of print, what we call print, even though it's all done digitally now. We try to get them up online, and when we do that, we open access them. But the point is that it's a long process. It's inherently a long process. Now, compare this to some of these open access journals. Now, I'm not a fan of open access. For those of you who aren't aware, there are two basic types of journals. There are subscription journals. JAPMA is a subscription journal, a traditional journal. You have to be a member of APMA, and one of the perks, one of the benefits of being a member of APMA is having access to JAPMA. Well, in the last 10, 15 years, there's been this explosion of open access journals. Open access journals are essentially, in my opinion, pay for play. In other words, you submit a paper. If the paper's accepted, if you pay $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, they will publish the paper. Right? I think that's a disincentive for the journal, whose business model is based on getting papers to publish, to have that aggressive peer review system. Now, I'm not saying they do or they don't. Some do, some don't. I tell the story, there's one very well-known open access journal. I tend not to submit to them, but some colleagues and I submitted to an open access journal. One of the requirements is that we submit a review to them. We, as authors, go out, get a review, and submit it to them with the paper.
Wow.
So what happens now is you get these open access journals. So they're much faster. They're all online. They put them up as soon as they get accepted. They can post them online. And when you do a PubMed search, what do you see? It says free online text.
Right.
So a researcher can then press on that. They get the full manuscript. We can't do that at JAPMA because, again, it's subscription.
Right.
So free online. And then that brings the whole issue with impact factor and all, but more of these open access journals get higher impact factors because the papers are freely available to anyone to get into. So they're faster to get out and more people get access to the papers. But in the meantime, again, I kind of question it because it is a bit of a pay for play sort of situation. Right. So that's my opinion. I'm sure there's some wonderful open access journals and they're doing some great work, some great peer review, but that tends to be the faster way to go.
That makes sense.
So it's complicated. I mean, I urge people to look at that paper I just wrote about this, where I talk about all of these issues. I talk about open access versus subscription based. I talk about the peer review system. Just real quick anecdote we were talking about beforehand. 3 weeks ago, I was in Malta. And I met with the Dr. Cynthia Formosa, who runs the podiatry school in the University of Malta, and her partner, Dr. Alfred Gatt. They're both PhDs. They're brilliant people. They've submitted an incredible amount of work to JAPMA, all high-end diabetic foot and biomechanics stuff. Absolutely brilliant researchers. And we had lunch together, and we were talking, and I said, let me address the elephant in the room. I know you're not happy with how long it takes for us to get some of your papers out. And I started explaining the peer review thing, and Alfred said, no need. Warren, I understand. Because he's now been named an associate editor for the journal The Foot. Okay. And he says, I can't believe how difficult it is to get reviewers and to get things done. So he was able to commiserate with me on this. So it's just the nature of the beast. And as I conclude in that paper I wrote, it's a seriously, deeply flawed system. Peer review, I mean, there's all sorts of biases built in. It's a seriously, deeply flawed system. but it's the best one we have. No one's come up in a couple hundred years. No one's come up with anything better.
Sounds like politics in America. It's the best out there, but it's flawed.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting, Warren. A lot of challenges. It makes my brain want to fix things, and I think to myself, what can we do to fix the system to make it more efficient? Wouldn't it be great if we could put 12 issues of JAPMA out a year instead of 6? Just
you want to get killed by our staff?
No, I'm just.
We used to be 12 issues.
I know you were.
But it, number one, back then it was paper edition. The cost was twice the cost because of actual printing, mailing, all of that, cello bagging, mailing, the whole routine. So it was incredibly more expensive. Now we're strictly online, but you still have costs associated with getting the papers proofed and formatted and up. Right. So yeah, it would be nice, but you need to have a staff that's 3 to 4 times the size of the staff we have now to do that. We have the papers. We have a backlog. We have a year-long backlog. We've got an incredible number of papers, of really good quality papers. We get papers from all over the world. Last year, Jeff, we had 30 countries submit to JAPMA.
I reiterate the fact we're undercapitalized. It sounds like money could fix it.
Have any?
Well, we can raise $1 million to increase our student recruitment activities. You'd think we could put out a journal to your satisfaction or in a timely fashion. All right. Well, sounds good. All right. Well, let me see. I've got a couple other bullet points here. Actually, we've kind of covered most of them. You want to shift gears to another topic?
Sure.
Let's talk. You're a theater buff, and you gave me some great recommendations recently. I went to New York and saw Hades Town and Sweeney Todd. Hey, I got a little bit of trivia for you. Did you know that Maury North, you know Maury, right? She's the executive director at the AACPM. Her nephew was on Broadway playing in Book of Mormon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when he was at New York University, he actually played the role of Tobias in a Sweeney Todd production.
Sweeney Todd is just, I'm a big Sondheim fan. Yes, I'm a theater nerd, big time theater nerd. Now, be that as it may, I am nowhere near the theater nerd that Tracy Vlahovic is.
Oh, I've heard that.
Oh my God, Tracy is just crazy there. But I will tell you, we are coming off a big win on the Oceania Cruise Line Broadway themed trivia night.
Oh, really?
From about 2 weeks ago, Judy and I, but we had some ringers. We teamed up with a young couple who actually run a regional theater in their hometown. We thought we're intense. They knew everything. But so we won the trivia. But I've been involved. I've been interested in Broadway theater forever, and theater as a whole forever. In fact, I talk about how much I lecture, and most of your listeners have probably heard me lecture somewhere over the years. And I've often said, if I had my druthers, my ideal job would have been to be an actor, Broadway actor, musical theater in particular actor. There's just 2 problems. I don't sing and I don't dance. So yeah, kind of like not going to work. But sure, not only am I a theater nerd, Stephen Sondheim, of course, the late Stephen Sondheim, we just lost him last year, like 99 or something. Truly one of the most brilliant playwrights and composers of Broadway theater music that's out there. And Sweeney Todd is considered one of his masterworks. I've seen it at least 4 times in different productions. I didn't get to see the production you saw, even though, as I mentioned, one of my favorite all-time Broadway actresses, Sutton Foster, is in it. But it's just a brilliant, brilliant piece of theater. It comes from the 60s, so it's not new. It's from the 60s. And it's a little dark. And for those of you who don't know, it's about a barber who would shave his customers, cut their throats, and then send their corpses down. This took place in London in the 1700s or whatever, and cut their throat, and then they would make meat pies out of the bodies. So it's a little dark, a bit of a dark topic. It was also pretty funny. Admit it, pretty funny.
It was very funny. In fact, Sutton Foster's performance was out of this world. Just She was Mrs.
Oh,
Lovett. She was the pie maker.
She makes the pies. She's just such a classic comedy actress, musical theater comedy actress. I'm going to send you the link to her doing Anything Goes, the tap number for Anything Goes, which is what turned me on to her. But anyway, so Sondheim wrote these incredible musicals that are thinking person's musicals. And Sweeney Todd was one of my all-time favorites. Certainly there's Company, Little Night Music, Follies, Into the Woods, Sunday in the Park with George. These are all classics. But, you also saw Hadestown. And Hadestown, for those of you who haven't seen it, is about the Greek myth of Eurydice and Orpheus and Eurydice, and the myth and going down to Hades. And it's just a brilliantly constructed musical. It's an all-female creative team. The author, Anais Mitchell, the director, Rachel Shafkin, the choreographer. It's an all-female production team and creative team, and they have put together this most incredible jazz theme, like New Orleans jazz theme musical. The band is right up on stage, and it is just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I highly, highly urge anyone who's in the New York area to see Hadestown. But there's so many great things. Hamilton is great. I turned around and I just suggested to you, Jeff, that go on Apple TV Plus and find Come From Away. Come From Away is a musical that is about Gander, Newfoundland, and the people in Gander when 9/11 happened and 38 planes were shunted because the airspace was closed out in the United States. We landed in Gander and they had to put them all up. And it is incredibly moving, poignant musical, but also incredibly funny. So it's like you're laughing and crying at the same time, with, again, some incredible music. So it's just a great art form. I mean, it's a truly American art form. I mean, it comes from America. It's an all-American sort of art form, and it's just an amazing. I'll take theater any day, even over movies. I'm not a big movie fan, but give me theater. And you saw some good ones.
Oh,
you're welcome.
They were fabulous, and thank you. It's so different than going to see like MJ or Neil Diamond or Ain't Too Proud to Beg, which was a great story about the Temptations. But there's something different.
They're called jukebox musicals. In the vernacular in the theater world, they're called jukebox musicals, where basically they build a story around an artist's music.
Right.
There's Jagged Little Pill. There's
Jersey Boys.
Jersey Boys is considered one of the classic jukebox musicals. About the Four Seasons, and there are a couple of new ones out there. And I will tell you, they're fun, they're good, they're fun. I mean, I know you saw. Did you see MJ? I know you saw the beautiful Neil Diamond one.
Yeah, we saw MJ. I mean, the acting was phenomenal. The singing was phenomenal too. Yeah, really good.
I mean, so it's familiar music, so it tracks. It's good for people who know the music and they build the story around the music, and there's some great acting and singing. I'm not a huge jukebox musical person. I like original theater. Not that that's not original. I like original musical theater, but jukebox musicals can be great. And what's amazing to me, and you see how much energy these people put into this. 8 times a week.
Amazing.
This singing and dancing 8 times a week. It's I don't know how they do it.
I saw an interview with Sutton Foster, and I think I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Aaron Tveit, maybe.
Right.
And they said that they had this small little window where they had to learn their parts, and then they had to just trust when they got in front of the audience, just trust themselves and let it go, and it just all came out.
You have to feed off the audience. It's like what I do with my lectures. If I do a lecture and the audience is sitting, I don't okay, whatever. But I did a lecture at SAWC, Symposium on Advanced Wound Care, the last SAWC, not the one that's going on like this week, in Vegas, and probably had 1,000 people in the room, and they were just into it. It's like I felt like a theater star doing my lecture up there. It was just, they were feeding back. They were laughing at the bad jokes. They were really into it. There were lots of questions. But it's the same thing with these. That's how they do it. That's how these actors do it. It's live. They feed off the energy of the audience,
Absolutely.
and that's just remarkable. It's just remarkable to me, and to do that the way they do it, just love it. And it's really cool. I urge any of you who, even if don't have access to New York, almost every major city has great touring, tours coming through. They do series, no matter what city you're in. Support the arts. The arts are incredibly important in the world. They're incredibly important in the country. Support the arts. Go to some good theater, and I think they can be life changing. Really can be.
Absolutely. It's so kind of fun to talk about things outside of podiatric medicine once in a while. So thank you for sharing your passion for the theater.
Yeah. We all have outside interests.
Absolutely.
Those are the people who know us think we usually, oh, he does infection, he does wound care, and he's a dean. No, we actually have other things we're interested in.
100%. Well, Warren, thank you so much for meeting on a Friday morning like this. Thank you. Great insights on our association's journal, and hopefully it will stimulate some more docs to get into research, or a variant of research to contribute to JAPMA.
Absolutely. And listen, if there are any questions on, we can put the link. My APMA email is WS. My middle name is Stephen, WS Joseph, JOSEPH, at apma.org. So feel free to email me, and we can always put that down in the description here.
Yeah.
If you have any questions about publishing in JAPMA whatsoever, I'm happy to answer those.
We could also in the links put that little YouTube snippet of Sutton Foster.
I'm telling you, I'm going to send you one that's going to blow you.
Sounds good.
I really am. But no, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about JAPMA and to do things. And I look forward to getting back to Arizona next week. We'll be back next Saturday, and I'll be down at the college later that week because it's the first week for my course. So hopefully see you face to face.
We'll get together for sure. Well, all of you listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, thank you so much for tuning in. Please give us a 5-star rating. And if you're watching on YouTube, we really appreciate it if you become a subscriber. And until next week, I know, Warren, you've got one of these cups, but I've got another one waiting for you in my office.
Oh, awesome.
Right on. All right. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye now.